Hey, it's a pleasure to be here on International Women's Day. There with Nadia Fisher, who's the CEO and co-founder of Witty Works, to talk about women, specifically women in the tech sector and the hiring of women in Switzerland. So first of all, thanks a lot for being here today with us, Nadia. Women in tech is a sector, and tech in general is a sector that's close to my heart in Switzerland. And it's been really encouraging over the last 15 years or so to see the number of tech positions. They're really increasing in the Swiss market. But during that time, the actual percentage of women in IT jobs has gone down. Why do you think that might be, Nadia?
Yeah, hi. Well, I think we have to look at the attractiveness of the sector. And, you know, if the sector is really attractive to female talent. And attractiveness, you could say, is not only defined by the job opportunities that open up now, or, you know, like if the salaries go up, which they definitely do now, because it's demanded so much. But it's attractiveness is very much defined by culture, and especially underrepresented groups and female talent specifically. They kind of need to see a culture within that sector where they feel that they can have a say, that their voices are actually going to be heard. And if you look at it, the image of the IT sector as a female talent, that image is quite different. It's still an image of, you know, there are lots of nerds, definitely mainly dominated by men, especially also lots of white guys. And so the image is rather one that if as a female talent you think you're going in there, you're going to be totally in the minority and not so sure if you really can make any difference there. And, you know, if you can ever belong. And I think that is one of the very, very big reasons why female talent don't enter the sector. They don't feel that they can really have an impact, really change things, and really, you know, in the end belong. That they would always be somebody at the edge of the developments. So they decide rather not to work there.
If we're looking at, you know, getting women into the sector in the first place, do you think companies are doing enough to attract that female talent that is out there? Or what do you think they could be doing more there to get women to apply to IT jobs?
Yeah, I definitely think they're not doing enough. There's much more measures they could take. I now see that they start to realize the problem, that yes, they understand that they need more diversity, but many kind of keeping at a marketing message. They just kind of put it on their career page. Yes, diversity is important to us. But I mean, in order to change that, you really have to take very concrete measures. You have to take, especially you have to take a look at your recruitment process. Actually, within the recruitment process, there are hidden many invisible hurdles for people from underrepresented groups, for female talent, but also for example, people with other skin color or from the non-dominant religion. And these invisible hurdles, they first have to really be detected, and the company has to take the care to wanting to detect those invisible hurdles. And that's what I don't see in the companies at all. One very concrete measure is, for example, we know from studies in the United States and in Germany that the language in job ads, actually, the way they're written today are very deterring to people from underrepresented groups. They use words and word combinations where, again, female talent does not feel invited to actually apply. And it's very easy to change that. It's not a big hurt, or it's not a big job for companies to change that. And even there, we see companies already having a problem changing the wording of a job ad, right? That's why we from Witty Works, we've developed a software. It's called the Diversifier, who helps companies just do that. You know, they can put in their job ads, check where are deterring words and alternatives are being proposed, so that they can write a job ad inclusively, as we call it. But even such very easy measures, I would say, companies have big trouble doing them. For me, it's still most of the companies, and a recent study from Uni St. Gallen has shown that as well, are still at the level of saying, yes, we want diversity and make it a marketing message, but there has to be much more. There has to be concrete measures in order that really to happen.
Yeah. I mean, could you give an example of the type of language that could maybe put off female talent from applying to a job?
Yeah, for example, if you're writing your job ad, you're an ambitious person and performance is important to us, or we are a young and dynamic team. That's all words and word combinations that just deter people with diverse backgrounds.
Okay, okay. What would be an alternative that could be used that might be better to those?
Yeah, it's very important to talk about cooperation. So not put the individual in front and only, you know, kind of ask for requirements of the individual, but rather say, hey, together with the team or together with a development team, we define our goals and we will reach them together, right? So put much more this cooperative feeling into it at the forefront. Also being, it's very important to describe the role in an emotional way, not just go, you'll do bam, 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 you know, this very hard sounding language, but rather explain what will be your daily life in that company, what will you work on, also be very concrete about what the person will work on. And that allows to make an emotional binding already between the job and the applicant. And that helps for the identification with the company. Also, what we found is it's very important to write in the job ad already about the company culture. Because what we know from people with diverse backgrounds is they first look at the role, you know, can they be competent in the role? And then the next step they're making is looking at the company culture. Is the company culture a culture where I can have an impact, right? Is the management style there that I can actually, that my voice will be heard? And if they don't see that, they won't apply. Okay, great. And talking about applying, actually, one thing that's quite often mentioned is the confidence gap. That men sometimes are, should we say, overconfident. They're in applying and you know, more willing to take a chance. And might apply to a position if they only meet maybe 50% of the requirements. And in my experience, sometimes a lot less than that. Whereas typically, women will only apply if they meet around 90% of the requirements. How do you think we could potentially address this? Yeah, I think first we have to stop talking about confidence gap because it's very misleading, right? It has nothing to do with confidence. We just call it that way because it's easy. But it actually is much deeper. It has, it comes from our socialization, and our socialization that we grew up with then really gets enshrined into our being, and we reproduce this socialization without even knowing. What the society has taught female talent, what, you know, being taught as a girl from very small on, actually from birth on, is that you should be authentic, that you should be very honest, and that you should be diligent. Okay, so imagine if you have this enshrined in your personality, which most female talents have, and then you read a job ad which has like 10 different requirements, you kind of think, oh, okay, if I'm being very honest, because, and this doesn't happen consciously, right? This happens unconsciously. If I'm being very honest, okay, out of these 10, I'm only able to do 5. So then she won't apply, because it's correct that she only applies if she covers 90 to 100% of the requirements. Boys are socialized very differently. They're socialized to be courageous, you know, and take a chance and just try it out, right? And that makes then their motivation, whenever they read the requirements, they can cover only 50%, and then they say, I go for it anyway. So it's we really must see that female talent is not lacking confidence.
Yeah.
They're only reacting to the socialization that they've enshrined, that they've grown up with. And that's why they interpret requirements, that they sense requirements differently. They see it not as a nice to have, the requirements, but they see it as a must. And I think this is something companies really have to understand, that that is a big, big difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think then also, you know, if we look further down the process, there's also quite a lot of challenges that we face in recruitment about the way that companies review applicants as well. There with that, because quite often companies still use the CV as the main tool. They're assessing someone's suitability there to a position, and they look at experience on a CV there rather than skill level there, or potential to learn or transition across there into these positions. So, you know, it's very difficult there when a client says to me as a recruiter, I'm looking for someone with 5 years of .NET development experience. That really narrows the pool of female candidates that can be actually considered for a position there in the first place, if we are strictly sticking to those kind of requirements of searching for someone with that level of experience on their CV. I mean, of course, some clients are a lot more open than others, and then when it comes to advice on how to improve their process there, and as recruiters, it can be quite a difficult balancing act between meeting the requirements that a client there puts forward for a job there, and actually looking to kind of influence their process and bring more diverse talent to the table.
So actually, then, do you have some examples of companies that have very good practice around this?
Of course, there are some there, but unfortunately not as many as maybe there should be. That some companies there have installed things like coding tests for the first round there, rather than doing CV reviews there with that. We've also had a few clients who have specifically asked us to go out and search for female talent, or said that they would actually, you know, reward us slightly greater if we do manage to bring them diverse talent. But in my experience, these companies, whilst there are still quite a few companies that say they want diverse talent, those that actually take proactive steps are still quite few and far between there with that. I mean, what about from your experience? Do you have some examples there?
Yeah, I have the same experience. There's a few companies, but very few ones we've consulted that really do take now such measures as having clear goals and attaching those to the goals of the line managers, because I think that is often the problem. Like, you know, the leadership team realizes the problem and knows it's a business imperative, and they put out the goal, let's say, like, by 2025, we want to have 30% of women, right? Mm-hmm. But often these goals are very general, because 30% of women, what does that mean? If you have like 30% of women only in the HR department, it doesn't it doesn't make a difference. From the Boston Consulting Group study, we know that you need to have diversity at every level and in every function. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work if it's just concentrated in one field. And so often the goals are still too general, and then also they do not trickle down to the like middle management. Mm. And that's where it needs to be. That's where it needs to be, that those understand in their decisions, because those are the people that take the recruitment decisions. So actually what we've seen in one company, and I think they're doing this really well, is that they've directly attach this to the goal, you know, to the yearly goals of the middle managers. Mm. And they're very concrete in what that quota means, or what, yeah, and where they can make exceptions, where they cannot make exceptions. But it's a very difficult, I'm not saying it's a very difficult discussion within companies, but it is doable. And I really think if you want to become diverse, that's where you need to go through. And I think that a lot of companies really do not understand yet that if you want to make your workforce diverse and you want to become inclusive, it's a culture change. It's a culture change that takes you several years, and it has a lot of friction in there. And you probably are also going to lose people because of that culture change, just like in any culture change. I used to be agile coach, and I know, if you go through from traditional to agile, you lose about 15% of the people. And that's probably just the same if you go from a traditional to a diverse company.
It's funny you mentioned the Boston Consulting Group study there. There was actually recently also a study by HireSki that showed that top performing companies do have more women across all levels of the business and a more diverse team there. So for companies, there is a clear business case that having a diverse workforce will actually help company success there with that. Are there any tips that you could give to companies who are looking to recruit more diverse talent?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, what you really have to find out is where are these invisible hurdles in your different processes and structures. And there's a lot of studies made on this, and there's a great book by Iris Bonet. She's a behavioral economist, and she's looked at all different studies, made studies herself, and found where invisible hurdles are, or where unconscious bias plays us, unfortunately. But definitely, I definitely would look at the recruitment process. Most companies still, when they decide about a talent, it's, as you said, in the CV, you have all the demographic information that's you already fall into biases because of that, because we always like to recruit somebody who just looks like us or is like us. It's called the similarity bias. But also when you, after an interview, if you just have like one person deciding, or maybe two persons deciding, but just kind of out of a gut feeling, it's sure you're going to fall into the trap of bias. But also afterwards, the promotion process, what we see we as WittyWorks, what we see in many companies is that promotion is still dependent of your network, right? So let's say a position opens up and suddenly, as we say in German, it goes away under the hand. I don't think you say that like that in English, but it's like, some people having an aperitif together or having a beer together, and then suddenly that position is gone. So it's not at all transparent which positions open up within a company, and there's no real process to really measure who would be best for that position. So there are actually a lot of possible measures. It's just the will to take them, the will to take them, and then to change your processes accordingly.
Definitely. No, I mean, there's a lot of different topics we could talk about there in this interview around those kind of things. But to sum it up, we'll move to the other side of the fence then, there to talk about very briefly women who are either looking to start a career in IT or looking to make that next step. Are there any tips that you might give to those people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first one is, be courageous. I know now, as I said before, this is typically not a socialization of women, but I think you have to kind of be courageous and just say, hey, I'm not going to look at, how the rest of the industry looks like. I just want to do what I want to do, and be courageous and try to do it anyway. Step out of the stereotype or out of your own socialization. It's really, really difficult, but I think some women achieve it. And that's my second tip, is actually look for your role models. Look if you can find women where you say, hey, these women really impress me, and follow them and try to interact with them. So, because that could be kind of your, goal of the future if you see such women. We know that role modeling actually works really well. And the third tip is also, in order not to be lonely, try to find the networks of women in tech. There are, like there's Reshape Tech, there's Girls in Tech, And, you know, gather with those, because that's really helpful. Once you get discouraged, you can talk to somebody who makes the same experiences as yourself. And that really helps you not to lose courage and not to lose motivation.
Perfect. Thanks, Nadia. We'll put links to all of those, their companies and groups there below this video. It's been absolutely fascinating to have your insights into this very important topic there. So, so I'd like to thank you very much there for your contribution, and just to once again say Happy International Women's Day.
Yeah, thank you to all of you too. Thanks, Tom.